Hello everyone, I'm Dawn. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for visiting with me today. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel, The Cutting Board. We do all kinds of things here. We do true crime, food content, Disney content, which, I'm so excited. We've got some Disney content coming up. Hauls, reviews, DIY, SFX makeup. I have a lot of interest and I want to share them with you. Now this video that I'm making today, we're going to have a little show and tell because I have things to show you. So I know many of you are new here and I appreciate you joining me. So I thought I'd make a video where I tell you our cancer story. I say our cancer story, but I should say my son's cancer story. He was the one who had to deal with being sick. We were just the parents freaking out every day. So one day in July 1999, my son was about 7 months old, and I was feeding him his lunch. After he finished eating, I, picked him up and laid him down to change his diaper, and I noticed that the right side of his stomach seemed really distended, and when I touched it, it was hard as a rock and bloated just on that one side, and it felt like a softball or hard like grapefruit. And the other side seemed soft and supple and normal. So I immediately called his pediatrician, and they wanted me to bring him in right away. And I didn't drive at the time, so I called my best friend to see if she could give me and Marshall a ride, and she came right away. And so we took him in. And while I was waiting for my friend to come pick us up, I called Eric's job to get a message to him. We didn't have cell phones, so that's how we had to send messages back then. So once we got to the doctor, they called him right back, and she felt his stomach. And she had mentioned his 6-month checkup, which was just only a few weeks earlier, and how she didn't feel anything then. She decided that she wanted to immediately send us to the hospital, that this was something that needed to be looked at more closely. And so as we was leaving, Eric was pulling up in the parking lot, right as we walked out of the exam room, and the doctor told him what was going on, and we got in the car and went to the hospital that she wanted us to go to. The first hospital she sent us to was the hospital where people without insurance go. Eric had just switched jobs, so we were kind of between insurance, and it was an unfortunate time for this to happen. And this was also the hospital where they brought crime victims. So there were gunshot victims and stabbing victims and other types of patients there, and a lot, sadly, and there was more than one of each. And there was a lot of screaming and insanity in the waiting room. I just remember screaming and just chaos. But the nurse took us back right away. They had already known from my doctor that we were coming. So they tried to put an IV in, but they couldn't find a vein because he was anemic. But we didn't realize that just yet. So they had to get a doctor to come in and go through in his groin to get blood because they needed that blood to test. And I remember getting really upset with the nurse. I was getting so mad that I was clenching my fist because, she was just doing her job. But I was so upset hearing him cry because he wasn't a fussy baby at all. He was not fussy. Hearing him cry wasn't a regular thing for me. And this was so long ago, so there are some details I'm forgetting or I'm blurry on, but I am doing my best. But I do remember that he was admitted to a room. By the way, my sister and niece was there with us, so we had family with us. And these two interns came in, and one of them she was nasty. So she got mouthy with me and said, well, he's anemic, but with an attitude. But the other intern took over, and she was much nicer. By the way, that rude, nasty intern later became an ER physician at the hospital I worked at. Of course, she didn't remember me because this was many, many years later, but nobody at the hospital liked her. They didn't like her at all. So after the interns left the room, a doctor came in and told me that they're sending us to the children's hospital because he needs to be seen by a pediatric oncologist. I didn't, again, well, this is the first time I was saying this, I didn't know what an oncologist was at the time. I really didn't. So an ambulance came for him, and I rode in the ambulance with him. And the rest of my family, my sister, niece, and my husband, they met us at the entrance to the ER where they told us to meet him, or where they told him to meet us at the children's hospital. And they took us up to what they called the ped-onc floor. And at this time in my life, again, I didn't know what an oncologist was. And but when the elevator doors open, I see in front of us, across from the elevator, the sign on this door that says the Ronald McDonald House Family Room. And that freaked me out like immediately. I'm immediately freaking out on the inside, not on the outside. I'm being really cool. But because the Ronald McDonald House is wonderful. It is a wonderful organization. But I'd rather it be something I donate to rather than something I need for my family. So we get put in a room, and another couple interns come in the room, very nice, to talk to us. And I asked what an oncologist was, and they both put their head down, and one of them just said it's a cancer doctor. Like, he didn't want to tell me what it was. Oncologists don't like to use that word cancer. I don't think that I ever heard any of his oncologists actually use the word cancer. But I was still pretty calm on the outside, though I was partly in denial. I was like, well, it's not cancer. It can't be. That's not possible. It's not cancer. So that night, Eric and I pretty much did not sleep. We tried, but we didn't. The room had a place for us to sleep. It was like a window seat. So the next morning, they did many, many tests, an ultrasound, bone scan. The day after that, they did a biopsy of the tumor. And I think it was a few days later, they did a bone marrow biopsy. But I want to tell you, I'm going to have a couple side stories here. This one is when he had an ultrasound of the tumor. Remember, I'm going on zero sleep, and I saw, and I'm sure I've shared this story with you before, I saw in the room they're doing the ultrasound, I look up at the screen, and it looks like a person or something is folded up like this, and then it lifts its head and spreads their arms that look like wings, and it looks like a demon to me. It reminded me of a gargoyle from that movie, The Gargoyles, with Jennifer Salt. You probably don't know what I'm talking about. It's a really old movie. But then it changed and turned, and then it looked like Jesus on the cross. It was weird. But anyway, I felt a little at peace, but then again, I think it was just me hallucinating because of, not sleeping. So, yeah. So we're trying to be patient, just, waiting for a diagnosis, some result. Oh, and the hospital was great. It was a really wonderful hospital. They sent the social worker to see us, the child life advocate, the chaplain, every service you can think of. And after about 2 weeks, maybe it was a little less than that, but we were there for a while. The doctor came in and officially told us the diagnosis, that it was stage 4 neuroblastoma. And he said that they don't know what causes it, but they do know how to treat it, and that, they were going to be very, very aggressive with it. He had a procedure to have a port placed in his chest, and I have it right here. I kept it after they eventually took it out. They gave it to me. It still smells like the hospital after all these years. But yeah, so I still have it. And the doctor sent us home for the weekend, and the following Monday, he was admitted back into the hospital, for a stay. I think it was like a 1-week stay to start chemo. And he didn't get too sick from chemo, not at all. He did lose his hair, and he got pretty thin. but the chemo never brought him down. He had a few symptoms, but he was a baby. He didn't know he was supposed to be sick, and he loved being at the hospital. He had a great time there. It was a party 24/7 for him. But about 24 hours after the first round of chemo, we noticed that the tumor, because we were pressing on it, it had significantly shrunk. We couldn't even feel it anymore. I didn't know it would shrink that fast, but it sure did. And he went through many rounds of chemo over the next several months, like 6 months. There were multiple hospital stays. And we saw a lot of that Ronald McDonald House family room that I saw when we got off the elevator. Because they had a refrigerator and microwave, and I feel like they had a stovetop, but I don't know. They had snacks and nice comfy furniture for all the families there. And it was very helpful to have for like a change of scenery or whatever. And 6 months after chemo started, it was about 6 months later, they did the surgery to remove what was left of the tumor. And they did warn us that he may lose a kidney, which he did not lose, but they did have to cut out some of his liver because the tumor remains were embedded into his liver. But, that's fine. The liver regenerates. That wasn't a big deal. Losing a kidney would have been a little bit more of a big deal. But here is a picture of him after his surgery. Let me show you. Because I got pictures. Hold on. I hope I have it. And I was a terrible scrapbooker. I was horrible at it. Is this even the right book? Okay. So this is him. That's him right after his surgery. I don't know how well you can see that. Sleeping. He's so sweet. My sweet baby. So I just wanted to show you that. I have to put it back now or it'll never get put back. I really just cut pieces of paper out and glued stuff down. That was the extent of my scrapbooking skills. Here he is here. You can't, I think this is after the first round of chemo, and you can't really see that his stomach is sticking out a little bit. But there he is in the hospital. Sorry. Let's see. Oh, he was such a cute baby. Now I'm just kind of looking at pictures, so let me stop doing that. But he was pretty down in the dumps until they took out his epidural. It was like, as soon as they took the epidural out, he perked right up. He was like a different person. Now, you just had surgery, your major abdominal surgery, and you're ready to party. But after he recovered from surgery, which didn't take long at all, he continued to get chemo and went through a few rounds of radiation, I think 5. And he got 3 tiny dots tattooed on him on each side and then right in the middle. And you could still see them today. And but in about August 2000, he had a stem cell transplant. A few weeks before the stem cell transplant, they harvested his own stem cells to use because they were healthy. Now, it was a little more intense than a biopsy, and he did have to get admitted because they were going to be making significantly larger holes, and they wanted him to be on pain medicine to manage it because it was going to be painful. But they did harvest the stem cells to use. They were healthy. He was getting what was called an autologous stem cell transplant. So when he went in for his transplant, they, of course, destroyed his bone marrow with a massive amount of chemo. They weren't worried about the stem cells because they were healthy, but when you destroyed the marrow, you just destroyed the stem cells. So, and then they replaced the marrow with his healthy stem cells. And oh, and it smelled like the stem cells. It smelled like cream corn and garlic. Ugh. And they told us he would be really weak and sick. No, he wasn't. He wanted to play almost constantly. My husband and I slept in his room every night, and he was like, "Hey, y'all ready to play?" With one type of chemo, they said it would seep out of his pores and cause burning. So they would come in and bathe him every hour to try and prevent that from happening. And we'd wake up to him in the middle of the night in the tub laughing with the nurses. He did have some burns from the chemo on his skin. It looked like abrasions. But he, for the most part, was a trooper. And it didn't really seem to bother him at all. It didn't. He just hated being cooped up in that room. He wanted to walk around the hospital, but he couldn't. You can't just do that when you're getting this transplant and you have no immunity. So, but he discovered Bear in the Big Blue House while he was in the hospital for his transplant. One day Bear was on, and he was sitting in the high chair, and he just looked up at him and just smiled away at him. And that became like his favorite show. He loved Bear and also the Teletubbies. He loved the little baby in the sun on the Teletubbies. I wish Bear would make a comeback. That was a great show. I enjoyed Bear. Oh, another side story. When Marshall got his wish trip, Disney had the Bear in the Big Blue House sing-along at Hollywood Studios. It was kind of near the Brown Derby, pretty close to where the Darth Vader and Chewbacca meet and greets are now. And the character Bear, well, he was not one you could really meet because of the nature of the costume. It was more like a puppet than a costume, or something like that. But they said they said it was like a puppet. But this is one of the reasons why I love Disney World and cast members so much. They always try to sprinkle magic whenever they can. And they made arrangements for a meet and greet for Marshall with Bear. Make-A-Wish asked Disney World if they could do it. They couldn't promise anything, but they asked Disney, and they said that he isn't a meet and greet character, but they're going to do it for Marshall. And let me see if I could find some pictures from that. I can't find the pictures right now, but he was even in the paper with Bear. It was a very special trip. One day I will tell you all about it, but I did find this picture. I wanted to show y'all this right here. See that? He's getting knighted at Medieval Times. That was before you could pay to get a knighting. Now you can pay to get a knighting. But anyway, he got knighted at Medieval Times before they even did it for regular kids. But that's a bummer that I can't find any pictures with Bear. I know I have them. I know that they exist, but I really need to get into my millions of pictures and deal with what's going on. But back to the stem cell transplant. So after he recovered from his transplant, was about 2 months after the transplant, they did a bone marrow biopsy, and there was no evidence of disease, NED, no cancer found. Unfortunately, a few months later, some neuroblastoma cancer cells returned to the bone marrow. So, but no tumor was present. So they aggressively went after it with chemo after several rounds of a chemo cocktail that they called ICE, and that's ifosfamide, carboplatin, and etoposide. They did another biopsy, and it was clean. And they did a biopsy every 3 months for a year, and they were all clean. And then it was like 2 a year, and then it went down to 1 a year until he wasn't getting any biopsies anymore. And but all of them were clean. And in the meantime, he was on maintenance chemo, which they discontinued after 2 years. So he had again, he had a few more bone marrow biopsies for a couple years, and they were all fine. So he's been cancer free now for 22 years. So we did have a little scare with his foot earlier this year, but it was a non-cancerous tumor. It was a glomus tumor, and he's fine. His foot is fine. Everything's fine. His only late-term side effect from the chemo is some high-frequency hearing loss, which is not affecting his life at all, and an incurable case of being a smartass. But that was more than likely inherited, or the inheritance of it makes it even more likely. You know what I'm saying? All of his oncologists that he had at the time, there was a team of 4. They are still at Nemours, and a lot of the same nurses are still there as well. One of them has passed away, our very favorite one. She passed away a while ago. She was the sweetest lady. Sadly, a lot of the kids we met while Marshall was going through treatment didn't make it, and that often scared me. And one thing I hate is when I see one of these parents out in public, which isn't that often. This is such a huge city, but I have before, and I don't want to. I know that they like to hear a child survived and is doing well, but I don't want to be the one that tells them, oh yeah, he's doing great, when I know they lost their child. So it's just uncomfortable. But if I have one piece of advice for parents facing a cancer diagnosis for their child, do not research it on the internet. You'll only make yourself crazy if you do that. But I mean, you're going to research it on the internet. I know that. But take anything you learn on the internet with a grain of salt and listen to the doctors. Listen to your child's doctors. They're the expert on your child, not internet doctors. Take lots of notes, because you will be overwhelmed and you will forget a lot of important information. And I'm giving more than one piece of advice. Also, do not be afraid to ask questions. I could actually probably write a book of advice now that I'm thinking of things to say. Oh, and take care of yourself. You're no good to your child if something happens to you because you let yourself get sick. Take care of yourself. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to everyone later. Bye.